Once again, I want to thank Barbara for hosting this virtual house party, and we can give her spirit fingers. Thank you very much, Barbara. I think this is our 345th virtual house party over the last 2 months. That's an exaggeration, but we've been doing this almost every night for the last few months straight, and we're a few days away from Election Day. And we're excited to have the wonderful Chief Jones, retired police chief of Healdsburg, as well as her partner in crime, no pun intended, her partner, Tony Lasoni, and also Supervisor James Gore is going to be featured in a segment tonight, answering some questions about what Measure P is. So thank you everyone for joining us. I see some of our some members who've joined us a couple times, so it's awesome to see you again. Quick introductions for both members who are going to be doing a quick presentation about what the measure actually is and what it entails, and then we'll have Supervisor Gore. But one thing that I want to mention as well that we're also going to plug at the end is we have a matching grant, or sorry, I work for nonprofits, but we have a matching donation of $10,000, up to $10,000, and we're $3,000 away. So if you like what you hear tonight, we desperately need your support to make sure that we can get out that last minute messaging for the undecided voters here in Sonoma County. So to kick things off, I want to quickly, it's an honor to introduce Chief Susan Jones. The career of retired Healdsburg Police Chief could easily be told as the story of an openly gay woman who took bold steps to overcome gender discrimination and rose to a top leadership position in law enforcement against the odds. She also served as mayor and council member in Healdsburg and brings a broad perspective to the issues that we're going to be discussing today. And we also have the honor of hosting Tony Lasoni, her partner. She's a plaintiff civil rights attorney with a litigation practice focused on illegal harassment and discrimination in the workplace. She's taught anti-harassment and anti-discrimination courses for nearly a decade at 2 public safety centers, was an instructor for the Regional Community Policing Institute of Sacramento, and serves as a subject matter expert in the areas of harassment and discrimination in the workplace for Post. And then we also have Supervisor James Gore, and he needs no introduction. I like to call him the imperfect, energetic, entertaining, absolutely incredible, all over the place supervisor for our county who's going to be answering some questions. So without any further ado, I will kick it over to Chief Jones and Ms. Lasoni, who are going to do a presentation on Measure P.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. We're going to share our screen here.
And one other logistical thing for those of you that have questions. Please put it in the chat, and I will be making sure that we track those questions so we can ask the presenters and Supervisor Gore.
Excellent. I thought you were going to say, tell everybody where the bathrooms were located. Sorry, that's just, sorry. So here we are. This is just a quick presentation of what Yes on P is. We are, first of all, what is IOLERO? It's an acronym for the Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach. It's independent. It performs civilian oversight of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department. And it was established in 2016 as a result of the community outrage after 13-year-old Andy Lopez was shot and killed by Deputy Sheriff Gelhaus. IOLERO is the agency of the county currently which oversees the sheriff's office and deputies. We need IOLERO because they provide an independent review of audits of law enforcement and administrative investigation.
So this woman talking, Tara, is the former chief of police of Healdsburg.
Yeah. Yes. So this includes allegations of misconduct by sheriff's personnel, providing an alternative avenue for the public to file complaints against the sheriff's office. And it's really important. This is really important because some people are intimidated or frightened to actually go to the sheriff's office to complain or file a complaint against a deputy, not knowing who they're going to talk to and how they're going to be received. IOLERO increases transparency, conducts public outreach and community engagement, and proposes policy recommendations regarding the sheriff's office. And community oversight is one of the best practices in modern law enforcement. It's one of the tenets of community-oriented policing and collaborating. And IOLERO also provides effective oversight, which increases transparency and accountability, and as a result increases trust between law enforcement and all communities. And as a result of that, it increases officer safety and safety to the community. The problem that we have now is IOLERO's effectiveness is currently challenged by the inadequate budget that they have, inadequate staffing, and inadequate authority to do their job. The sheriff's office's refusal to grant IOLERO access to all relevant records and information. So what is Measure P? It will strengthen and improve IOLERO. It mandates the mutual collaboration with the sheriff's office. It mandates that IOLERO have access to the sheriff's investigation, incident reports, evidence, dispatch records, and databases. And it establishes the clear authority of IOLERO to conduct independent audits and investigations. And importantly, authorizes independent subpoena power to IOLERO. It establishes IOLERO legal authority over investigations into use of force, constitutional violations, sexual assault or sexual harassment, and allegations of bias in policing or incarceration. And there's no new taxes. It authorizes an adequate budget equivalent to 1% of the sheriff's budget, allowing for adequate IOLERO staffing. And it authorizes a 3-year term for the IOLERO director with removal for cause only by a 4-5 vote of the Board of Supervisors. Tony, take it away.
Okay. So last year's budget for the sheriff's office was approximately $180.5 million. And of that money, IOLERO received approximately $550,000. That amount of funding proved to be wholly inadequate to do the job of effective oversight. There was very little money in the budget for staffing in particular. This year, the supervisors budgeted $1.4 million for IOLERO and $190 million for the sheriff's office. But Measure P will increase that amount to a minimum of $1.9 million instead of $1.4 million, which would be a 1% of the budget for the sheriff's office. So from my perspective, especially as a civil rights attorney who has sued multiple public entities over police misconduct, I can tell you that an ounce of prevention is definitely worth a pound of cure. So even if we're just looking at this from a strictly financial perspective, it's definitely worth doing. Because of increased misconduct and the lack of oversight needed to stop it, the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office had to pay. Excuse me. Okay, I'll keep going. Had to pay a 46% increase in the amount of $2.7 million, an increase in its insurance premiums because of a record amount of $6.6 million that it had to pay out to plaintiffs who sued over excessive force and or wrongful death. This makes the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, puts it in a category of its own where it actually has a worse record for increased police misconduct cases than any other county of similar size in the entire state, including the Bay Area. And that's not good.
No, and there's more cases that haven't been settled yet. So currently we are endorsed by our congressmen, senators, assembly members, and 5 of the 6 supervisors.
4 of the 5, sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. 4 of the 5. I can't count. Also, you can see these here, Sonoma County Democratic Party, many of the local elected officials. And that's it. So we are asking for questions.
So there was one specific question that came up about who is funding the No campaign, and we kind of answered that in the chats, but I just wanted to let everyone know, if you did not have an opportunity to see it, there's a link in the chat that actually allows you to go to the financial filed financial forms at the county office. But for the most part, the Farm Bureau has donated $20,000. The Sonoma County Deputy Sheriff's Association donated $5,000. And the Sonoma County Deputies Sheriff's Association Political Action Committee donated $5,000. And then a company that is owned by Guy Fieri, or Ferrari, or however you say his last name, the guy with the really cool goatee and awesome hair, he donated $2,500 as well.
Great.
And there was another question, which supervisor doesn't support in that. Just to be very clear here, the supervisors voted to put this on the ballot unanimously, but the only supervisor that has not endorsed this campaign on either side is Supervisor David Rabbit. Oh, sorry, I muted myself. But now, thank you so much to Susan and Tony, and we're going to segue over to Supervisor Gore, and I have my question list here. Thank you once again, Supervisor Gore, for joining us this evening. We know you're a busy dude, and we want to kick off tonight's questions to you with the number one question. And can you address the defund the sheriff claim made by the opposition?
Yeah, thank you, Herman, and thank you everybody for having us here. You know, I was proud to be one of the deciding votes in moving this over when we reviewed it a couple months ago at the Board of Supervisors. I'll talk about the defund in just a quick second, but I just want to set a preface here. Is that the reason that I voted strongly for this is not only do I support the efforts of ILARO. It originally started when I joined the Board of Supervisors. There was something called the Community and Law Enforcement, Local Law Enforcement Task Force that came up with recommendations. Those recommendations, some of them were implemented over the course of the next 3 to 4 years. I worked with, at first, Director Jerry Threed, who I think is on the call, through ups and downs and trials and tribulations and issues with access and issues with being able to get funded for support staff to be able to complete this kind of trifecta role of, number one is being able to do a review and audit, and which is truly an independent review. It's not an activist review. The second thing was is the ability to outreach and get direct contact and content with communities and interested communities, and that's the Community Advisory Council, the CAC that we call it. Then the third thing was what we would call amplified community outreach in my mind, which is the ability to get out there and let folks know what's going on, because this world is a very insular world of law enforcement management, law enforcement review, and other things. So Herman, thank you, and I'll get back to the point. As I drive down the road and I see these signs up that say defund the police. I consider those to be false, and I consider those to be hyperbolic and exaggerated. If anybody wants to learn more about that or challenge me on that from the other side, is all they have to do is take the time to do something nobody wants to do, which is watch our Board of Supervisors budget hearings, right? The most boring thing to watch in the world, but very important work. During that time, I was one of the most active people in making sure that we had our deputies funded on the ground, that we had our substations in our regional areas, in the Springs, down in the Lower River, and other things, that they were fully funded. This is not a defund the police campaign for me personally. I believe and I totally support law enforcement in all aspects, but I also fully believe that transparency is needed. And I feel that transparency should be developed not just by insular rules that go through union negotiation process and other things, and at the same time is by closed session Board of Supervisor meetings with lawyers and others based on litigation. I think transparency for all entities, this included, is for me. I operate with full transparency every day. I have to do my business in something called the Brown Act that the legislature and the Congress doesn't have to do. I mean, what that means is that it's a messy Board of Supervisors meeting just about every week, because we can't cook the agenda before we do it. We're not allowed by law to talk to our other colleagues who are going to be voting on something before it comes on. And so I just personally feel that that's the right thing to do. And so the defund the police thing doesn't really hold a lot of merit. I know that there was some justification by saying that the one thing that we didn't backfill into the sheriff's budget was about $900,000 in travel budget to be able to do training. Personally, we backfunded deputies, we did other things. That was one of those things. Everybody got some cuts this year, and that one included. It had no nexus to this. So those who are trying to draw a nexus are trying to justify a position that they already hold, in my mind. And they can disagree with me or agree with me, but that's my take.
Thank you, Supervisor Gore. There have been a couple questions. I've noted them, but I got some questions that I have for Supervisor here. And the next question was, can you comment on another point that's been raised by the opposition about Measure P? That Measure P was rushed to the ballot by the Board of Supervisors, who yielded to community pressure and made a flawed decision to place it on the ballot.
Yeah, again, that characterization is blatantly false. I have worked on this issue since coming to the Board of Supervisors 6 years ago with the CAE and the creation of ILARO. We have had 5 or 6 different meaty, heavy yearly discussions about where this office is, where is it going. We tried the incremental approach, which was something that was, difficult for the then director to deal with, which was make little changes here, do little changes there. The ballot initiative itself was drafted more than a year ago, if I remember correctly. And I reviewed it at that time, and I was asked to endorse it early on. I am a thorough person. I go through all different avenues before I decide to jump on board with something or not. Even towards the end of our discussion, there was 2 items that came up from our county council internally about the ballot initiative that they thought that would have difficulty to be held up in court. One of those was this issue of budgeting, of having 1% of the sheriff's budget be continually allocated, that is a challengeable thing of us prescribing budget to a future Board of Supervisors based on policy calls. And then there was another item that I didn't think was the most consequential. And the point there is that I felt like both of those could be addressed if they needed to in court, but neither of them dealt with the subject matter of strengthening this office. Those were technicalities of how much we're going to fund and whatever. Once again, it was not rushed. Yes, there were people, including the sheriff, and I don't, chagrin him, who said, I want more time to review this, but we came to a point where this was either going to be on the November ballot or not. And so I had to make a call, just like we have to every Tuesday. And my call was the third kind of turning vote to push this over the edge, and then we got a unanimous vote.
Good.
Thank you, thank you. And then you've already answered the next question, so I'm going to skip it and go to wanting to hear from your perspective. What's the most important benefits of enhanced oversight for the county sheriff's office?
Well, you know, I'll give you the talking points, and then I'll give you my perspective, right? And I am one of these people who absolutely and utterly supports the good work of law enforcement in our community. And I believe that law enforcement, adequate and effective law enforcement, is the underpinning for a successful and a safe society, right? That's not, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I lived in many other countries. I speak multiple languages. I know what it's like to live in a place that's lawless, right? And where people are being taken advantage of. On the other side, I have also been a supervisor who has gone through the process of seeing different trainings, different de-escalation trainings continue to go year after year and year after year. And I've also seen that not always hit the ground in some of the things that we've had to deal with lawsuits against a few of our deputies and in other areas. And, you know, like you, that concerns me. So I think there's an accountability portion of this that all of us who operate in this world of service have to understand that service, even though you give so much of yourself, you have scrutiny. You have a huge amount of people overlooking your shoulders at every minute. And I think about this when I was participated in the positive demonstration protest in Hillsburg. I see Aussie council member on, where we honked and walked the streets, and the police honored it, and they were, you know, and it was really a beautiful thing this year about trying to face very difficult issues. That resulted in changes in the city council, that resulted in a new dimension that needs to be added for everything going forward. New people ran for office who hadn't before, who were inspired. And I believe in that movement personally, as a white guy of privilege who's had an opportunity to learn and to look that straight in the face, right? So if I look at, as I say, the talking points of this, how is this going to strengthen? Well, it provides greater access to the records in a mandatory way from the sheriff's office and from the internal affairs office to be able to share that information openly and transparently. It also provides, let's just say this, the staffing to be able to go through this. When Carlene Navarro came in and replaced Jerry Threed as our director, there was such a backlog of our audits, not because Jerry wasn't working his tail off, but was because he was working with basically half an administrative assistant trying to do community outreach, organize a committee of a community advisory council, and do all the audits on his own, right? So number two is you can't have a goal if you don't resource it. And then number three, it's just this overall point, which is having greater authority and independence of the director in this office provides that it is going to be an accountability measure for not just the sheriff and not just deputy sheriffs, but for me and for each and every city council that watches and other people say, how are you stepping up to address this issue? I don't know the exact numbers, but I have heard that there are only about 12 or 13% of the counties that have effective ILROs. I know that more cities do, but let's also just agree that cities operate in a structure where the police chief is hired by the city council and the city manager, not direct elect. And then let me also say that, you know, I've worked over the past 5 years collaboratively with Steve Freitas, Rob Giordano, and Mark Essick, our current sheriff, on this issue. It's just at this time, I believe incrementalism is not enough. And I feel that we have to, if we want a tide shift, we have to take a bigger step.
Awesome. Thank you, Supervisor Gore. And since we have the privilege of having Chief Jones, a retired law enforcement chief, local too, I was wondering if you could maybe provide your input on the question of, from your perspective as a retired chief, what is the most important benefit, or what are the most important benefits of enhanced oversight?
It's, it's like I mentioned during the slides, it does increase officer safety because there's more trust there between the community and the police. We ask, if you go back to Sir Robert Peel's tenets of community policing, one of the things that he says is the police are the public and the public are the police. And the police are the only ones paid to do what is incumbent upon everyone to do. And in order for us to have the public help us, help the police with the job, we have to trust each other. And if we're not going to share information with the public, then how can we expect them to share it with us? So we've really got to break that down. And there's many agencies who have, but I do see a real struggle with the sheriff's office. So I think we're on the right path with P. Yes on P.
Awesome, Chief Jones. And I have one more question for you, Supervisor Gore. With all that's been happening with sheriffs across California and other counties and sheriff's leadership being questioned or challenged, do you see Measure P as a tool for accountability that's going to help the Board of Supervisors address concerns about our local sheriff's office to help build trust, not just in our whole community, but more specifically in the communities of color that exist here in our county?
Yeah, I'll take that from a couple different sides. Number one is, as I said before, is Measure P holds me accountable. And I like my feet being held to the fire, right? As a supervisor, as others, it puts in me also a mandate that I have to support the independence of that office. And for me, why would I not support an independent office? And I think that's one of the things here is that there's been accusations that this is run by a bunch of activists. If you go meet with Director Carlene Navarro, or if you talk to me and others about it, these are very thorough, responsible, endeavors. I mean, sure, there are people who are saying out there, defund the police and change this. And I'll tell you, the Board of Supervisors, we're acting on a bunch of fronts on this. Like during budget, we invested about $5 million more into mobile support teams so that we don't always have the first person who shows up if somebody's having a behavioral psychological breakdown is somebody who is in uniform with a gun, right? I like to have the officers backing up our adult protective services and our social workers. I don't think that he needs to be the first rung of response all the time. So this stuff is integrated into this discussion of community policing and trust building and all of this other stuff. I do want to address before I jump off, or as we're getting there, Herman, there was a close to home written today, right? And it was written by Mike Vail, Deputy Sheriff's Association. And I've had a good relationship with Mike, and I will continue to have a good relationship with him. But I just, I can in this world to respectfully disagree, right? And a lot of what the close to home talked about is it wasn't salacious. It was talking about the process. But I'll tell you, when people don't like the product, they usually attack the process, right? And it's very normal in my business and in politics and other things is if you don't want to vote yes on something, then you say that, you didn't confer with us. And they have a right to take us to court to say we didn't follow union rules for meeting and conferring when we did this. And I look forward to see what the court says. But I think what's also been said is that this is not a one-off initiative, either Measure P or any court initiative. This is a consistent effort to do the right thing by our community and have it be leveled and measured. And this comes from somebody who on my election was endorsed by both the Deputy Sheriff's Association and the Farm Bureau, who's opposing this. And I am just letting them know, I don't agree with you on this one, and that's okay. So my goal is vote for Measure P, and if you have questions about it, don't just take the wordsmithing or what's on the signs, right? Actually have the desire to dig into it and understand what it means rather than what you drive by and it says firefighter support, right? Which was more the deputy sheriffs meeting with the firefighter unions and saying they didn't consult in these things. Politics is interesting and everybody plays it in their own way. I do want to say one more thing. I had somebody who came at me pretty hard on this, and I've had quite a few people. And one of them was somebody who's been a longtime steward of kind of, what is what you're doing? Is it too much taxes? Is it too much overlap? I want government transparency. And he came back at me and said, I just want to let you know I'm not with you on this. I'm with the opposition. And why are you wasting money? And I looked back at him and said, that's the first time you have ever told me you want less transparency in government. Coming from somebody who's always demanded from, I would just say, more of a conservative mentality, of a landowner mentality. And I don't say that as a broad based, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, but I challenged him. I said, this is the first time I've ever had you bring up something that you want less transparency because you think this is overlap bureaucracy that's going to stop things from going right. And then he kept asking me questions, email. I said, why don't you give me a call? No, email, like attacking me on it. I said, I can send you hundreds of hours of basically Board of Supervisors meetings. I can send you reports of the Kaye report, but truthfully, I think you have your mind made up. So tell me if you haven't, and I'll send you that information. But if you have your mind made up and you just want to give me hell, then I'll talk to you in a couple months after the election, right? And that's where it stood. And so once again, I'm trying to promote this as a level-headed discussion, and I hope people will keep that in mind when they go to the polls.
Absolutely, Supervisor Gore. And you brought up something that really has really frustrated me and really has honestly pissed me off. And one of the main reasons why I've spoken out even more, not about even the measure, but about the unethical campaign that is being run by the opposition. And I'm sorry to bring this up, but there's a couple questions that are asking about denouncing the falsehoods. But one of the things that there's a lot of people on this call that I know have been very involved in local politics. It's a lot of people who are usually on campaigns or helping candidates get elected. I've seen a lot of their faces in the campaign realm. I've been around for 7 years since I've moved back from San Diego. I've worked on multiple campaigns. Every 2 years, I'm doing something for a different campaign. I have never in my history in 7 years of working local politics seen a committee run such a blatantly misinformation campaign that is literally like taking advantage of voters who aren't paying attention and they're just reading the signs. So 2 things. One is I can't believe that they put the defund the police on their signs, which is just unacceptable. But their committee name is the most confusing and most unethical committee name I have ever seen in local politics. The Committee for Transparent Justice. How confusing can you be, and how much more can you make up a lie? So some of the questions, and you've already kind of touched on some of these, but I want to respect Kathleen Finnegan, who's been very involved in a lot of local advocacy work, but very involved on this measure. And she's asking, why isn't the Board of Supervisors denouncing these falsehoods? Although you kind of have already in this discussion, but out loud so your constituents can actually know the truth.
Well, it's amazing because it makes me think also of when I ran for office the first time and there was about $400,000 put in an independent expenditure account saying that I was all about lying, cheating, stealing, gravel mining, destroying the environment. And it sucks, right? One things I would say is that if you, and I'm not gonna jump on that as a crazy one. I live in a world where I have to compartmentalize this stuff. Like the people who funded the Hate Gore campaign, I met with them the week after my election because I had to work on negotiations for union negotiations and others. And I, and get stuff done. With the deputy sheriffs and the Farm Bureau members, I'm still proud to have the endorsement of farms in my life and deputy sheriffs. And I'm going to continue to support them. With respect to the campaign, right? Like you, I drive by those signs and go, nah. That doesn't make sense. And so, there's this funny thing in this world though too, and as much as anything, if you're in those rooms, there's, you know, and I say this respectfully, is that there's, you know, there's justification in their minds. Like some of them said, oh, because you deleted the travel budget for training by 900,000, that's a defund the police. A lot of those same people did not watch the Board of Supervisors budget hearings. They don't apply it within context. And I think the big point there is that I want to applaud everybody who's on this stinking call, because you actually care enough to dig. And there's layers with all these issues. You know, when I have a RV homeless encampment at the corner of Alexander Valley Road and Hillsburg Avenue that takes months to get people connected to service and get people who are service resistant to look at other avenues. And then I deal with, you know, there's some people who come up to me and are like, you have to provide an option for everybody. I'm like, I can't. I have to do what's utilitarian, the greatest good for the greatest number of people, because otherwise stuff doesn't get done. So with this, you know, I think this has a great opportunity to pass. And I want to address another question. If it doesn't, you know, I'm inspired to continue to take up the ordinance before the Board of Supervisors again. We put a huge amount of money into ILERO's staffing this year. You know, so I want to say kudos to all of you for what we're doing. And no matter what happens, if this passes or doesn't, tomorrow we're going to have another, you know, another part of this that we have to address. And so my request is to stay engaged and make sure people know the truth of what's going on from your perspective. So
And
it's
that's
go
a
time.
good point. That's a great point, Supervisor Gore. The supervisors have already made a bold step forward for ILERO, increasing the ILERO's department budget in their last approval of their budget for 2020, 2021, where they increased the budget from 500,000 to 1.4 million. And that's going to allow them to hire 2 extra attorneys to help with all of the oh, now I'm blanking on the name, but the complaints from the public. Because if you actually read, or if there's an actual ILERO report on their website, I have to commend Director Navarro and the ILERO team. I read the report. It's about 69 pages long, and I thought it was very well done. I actually learned so much from that I didn't know. And one of the things was that they've only, because of the lack and inadequate funding for the department, they had 24 complaints from January to July of this year, and they only got through 50% of those complaints, completed them. So increasing their budget to 1.4 million so they can have 2 extra attorneys is already a great step forward. So thank you.
Well, Herman, if I can on that, I need to jump in when
Yes, sir.
Director
Go ahead.
Navarro and for many of the reasons that I outlined of insufficient funding, insufficient access, and other things, there was a backlog. And I'm not looking back and saying that that was somebody's fault that there was a backlog. But the backlog under the current operating structure would have taken 8+ months to clear out in only reviewing that with no subsequent staff or anything like that. So there was actually discussions that were being had of, if some of these are over 1.5 years or 2 years old, do we just not review them? To which point, me as a supervisor is like, hell no. Unreviewed, justice denied, right? I mean, even if the point is that it was going to put them to rest or whatever kind of review you need to do that. So once again, you know, government, as in life, your priorities are shown by somebody says, give me your checkbook and your calendar and I'll show you your priorities. And so we have shown that this is a priority for us as a board. And like I say, is that, you know, I've approached this as a yes and not an either or campaign, right? Supporting law enforcement and increased, strengthened, transparent oversight. And I think that's what's right for our community and for California at large.
Here, here.
There was a private question that was asked that may be more directed to the woman, the myth, the legend, Barbara Grasecci. It's about the campaign. And do we have a temperature gauge of where the measure is right now? What are the likelihoods of winning, and what have we been doing to get our message out there? And how big is the challenge to make sure we get a yes on Measure P?
So I would just say that our initial polling on the measure showed that when people learned more about the measure and they heard the arguments that the sheriff was going to make and our arguments, the approval for the measure actually went up from the initial contact. So we started at 62. They heard all the bad things that were going to be said, all the inaccuracies. They heard what we said. It went up to 65. So what we know is that it's just a matter of getting our message out. If we get our message out, we can prevail. So that's what we've been working on. We text banked, we're phone banking, I precinct walked for the first time in my life. And by the way, my legs hurt after that. I think COVID has got me in such bad shape, but the dog loved it. So a lot of us on this call, we all have dogs, right? And we have to walk them anyway. So I'm telling you, precinct walking is what it's all about. So we're feeling paranoid and positive. The biggest issue we've got right now is we need more people to volunteer to do that phone banking. That's super critical right now. To do the dropping of literature, I can just tell you that when you drop the literature, we're not knocking on doors because we're in COVID world. We're all wearing our beautiful, I've got a lovely Black Lives Matter mask that I wear. And it's super easy. You just put the little thing on their doorstep and they get the little information about yes on P and why that's so important. So we need all that, but I'll tell you the other thing we really need, we had a mailer go out, we've done a few things. The deputy sheriffs just put another $10,000 into the No on P campaign. So we are, right now, we're about 30K shy of what we need money-wise. So that's a huge, huge piece of it. And spoiler alert, actually it's not a spoiler alert because Herman mentioned it earlier. We have a matching opportunity that expires at the end of tomorrow. So I'm not going to say anything more about that. Did I get that? Paranoid and positive. That's, I think, where we're at.
No, Barbara, I think you kind of set it up for Supervisor Gore, unless there's any other questions that we haven't been able to answer. I think what I'm going to do in the spirit of the San Francisco Giants winning 3 World Series last decade, I want to bring in the closer if there's no more questions, and I hope Supervisor Gore knows what that means, because we need the closing remarks at this moment, sir.
You can call me the beard. So here's the closer, right? And this is for everybody who called in and everybody who's out there, is that Measure P is good for our community. Measure P is good for our officers. In my mind, it provides enhanced protections. It provides a better community engagement process, and we need your help. We are positive about this campaign. We are also paranoid enough to work our tails off to the finish line. That is the only way anything ever passes. And more than that, we have a matching opportunity. We need you to open your pocketbooks. I'm going to open my personal pocketbook, not my campaign.
Hey.
A $500 check to the Yes on P campaign. In a way, it's strange because that's your tax dollars at work since you pay my salary. But of all ironies aside, I would love for you to consider to match me. We need at minimum to get to $3,000 to finish up our max. So I'm going to pledge $500 today from Elizabeth and James Gore. I believe in this, not just in name, but I believe in this with my heart, and I believe in it with my pocketbook.
Excellent. Nice.
Awesome. So that means, if my math serves me correctly, we need $2,500 more by the close of business tomorrow night. So please, if you can, the website is in the chat. You can go directly to the website and swipe your credit card or debit card. And we would appreciate the heck out of all of you. And Mr. Tenenbaum just matched Supervisor Gore's $500, meaning we're $2,000 away. So unless there's any, thank you so much, Mr. Tenenbaum. And oh, I thought somebody else had.
Yeah.
But we're at $1,000. So thank you, Supervisor Gore. Thank you, Chief Jones and Tony for doing the presentation. If there's any other questions, we have a couple minutes, but other than that, we'll give you back your 12 minutes so you can enjoy your evening. And so we are going to get this out. We need to share this recording on our social media and with our friends and our family, so they have a better idea of what Measure P actually does and why it's good. for our community and for our law enforcement officers, because it's going to change the culture for the better, and it's going to hold our whole community accountable, including Supervisor Gore. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, and remember to vote yes on P.
Yay.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You
You
too.
too.